Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We are here with JoEllen Simpson. She is the General Director at the Colombo Americano, and she is a PhD in linguistics from the University of Florida. The reason why she's here today is because she's going to share her very interesting insights on writing, on teaching writing. And I know what the type of passion she has about it. So that's why we are sharing some of minutes with her in this little interview that we are having with her. So, Joellen, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Thanks for inviting me. And hello, everybody. It's nice to talk to you, even though we're not, face to face. It's nice to have this chance to interact. So Brian invited me to talk to you about my passion for writing and teaching writing. I've been teaching writing for a long time, and the one thing that I've seen most is that students don't like writing. When they come to me, I see students who are frightened, who have had bad experiences writing. Many of them lack confidence. And so I see my role as a writing teacher, first of all, is to help them overcome that, to help them become people, who are more passionate about writing. I try to get them to be more like me, in terms of that. And so, that would be the first step that I would say that, if you're going into the teaching profession, and when you start teaching writing specifically, to try to loosen up, try to make it fun and exciting for students. I recognize that most of you are going to be teaching English to very low-level learners. I recognize that, here in Colombia, most teachers are teaching A0 or A1 level students. Very few have the pleasure of teaching A2 or B1. And I know that many teachers say, well, I can't teach writing because my students don't know anything. So they just abandon the whole idea of teaching writing. And my argument is always, if you can teach anything in language, you can teach writing. You just change the level of the activities. They can be very basic activities with simple sentence structure. And the wonderful thing about writing is it gives students time to think. When you're in the class and you ask a student a question, to answer you verbally, orally, generally the reaction is, oh my gosh. And they have, they're like, wait, and so then they stop and they think it in Spanish, and then they translate it into English. With writing, there's that natural pause, there's that natural time for thinking. And so for me, it becomes a truly valuable way of getting the student into the language and giving them time to think about it as they're preparing those sentences, or paragraphs as they get more advanced. Let's see here. Do you have any specific questions for me, Brian?
Yes, do you, part of what we are doing in this class is to discuss a little bit about how skills can be integrated. And now that you say that if you can teach anything in writing, anything you can teach writing along with it. So how do you see writing being integrated with other skills in a class, in an activity, in the different procedures that we follow in a regular session?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love to integrate writing with other skills. I actually very seldom have a writing assignment that doesn't have speaking or reading or listening that goes together with it. First of all, if you write, somebody should read it. And that just makes sense. Writing is meant to be read. So if you ask your students to write something, the natural thing is to have students read what the other students write. I really like to use journals for that. I like to have shared journals, so students have a chance to read each other's writing and comment on it, if possible. And again, you can do this at any level. You can do this, at an A0 or an A1 level, where students are writing simple phrases and then they're reading those simple phrases and, answering questions. So, right there you've got reading and writing, which are so are closely related. Also, you can have students talk to each other. I was just coming up with an activity for my next class, where it's called a persona poem. And there's several, it's not really a poem, it's more of a description of a person, but it has a very specific structure. And so the first line is the person's first name. And then the second line is likes, and then three things. And then the third line is, I don't know, a relationship. And then the fourth, so it has information that you need to collect from the person before you actually write. So there is like an interview where you have to say, so what are three things that you like? And so then
So,
they'll
so
say,
it means so it
go
means
ahead.
also that then writing under the vision that you have is also interactive. It's an interactional exercise, not only with the partner, with your own ideas, but also like with the text, with what you are writing, because you need to have a time to check also what you've been writing.
Yeah, definitely. For me, writing isn't something that you do alone, locked in a room. It responds to input that you have from your classmates, from something that you've read. You can write about what you've read. For me, definitely writing is much more than grammar practice. This is something that if you guys are going to talk about feedback, this is something that I really truly emphasize. You're practicing writing should be completely separate from practicing grammar, because practicing writing is just as you said, Brian. It's interaction, and if you're just doing it to correct the use of past tense, then we're not doing anything. We're not communicating anything. It's just becoming an exercise in grammar. So I really like it to be
So,
separate.
so you also mean that when teachers do this exercise of write three sentences using future with will, this is not really writing, or what type of writing is this, or
Yeah,
is
that's
this
not
grammar
writing.
practice?
Yeah, for me, that's grammar practice. When you say write three sentences using the future tense with will, that's grammar practice. That's not writing practice, and it's valid. It's valid as grammar practice, but it's not writing. Writing is when you ask your students to write something, a description of something, or like this persona poem. It's something. It's very simple. It has this structure that's easy for students to follow, but it's creative. It's something new. And then you shouldn't go in and correct the grammar on that. You're focusing on the meaning, the sharing of information. Uh, and that to me is what writing should be about. When you read a newspaper, you read a newspaper to enjoy it. You don't read a newspaper to correct the grammar. And so that's how I always approach writing. I really try to separate that grammar practice from writing practice.
So you think that if there is this view in your view of writing, if we interact, if we have writing interacting with other skills, um, does it look more like process writing than product writing?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And
Can
and also,
you expand a little bit on probably on the two concepts and your ideas on that, please?
okay, sure. Product writing is, when your teacher says, write three sentences using the future tense. So first of all, that's not even writing. That's grammar practice. And the only focus is on that structure. That were you able to complete the assignment managing that structure? And you get a grade on that. You get one chance. You do it, and you get a grade on that. Process writing is much more about the development of the idea, where you've got a long stage of idea generation at the beginning, through brainstorming, through mind maps, through many things. And then you organize those ideas, and then you put those ideas into the text. And again, it could be a very simple text. It could be, a sentence or two sentences for your basic level learners. But there is all of that process beforehand of generating ideas, of remembering vocabulary, of thinking about the structure, and then actually doing the writing. And then the whole idea of interacting and sharing with others. You've got other people who read what you wrote. For example, your classmates can read what you wrote, give you feedback, ask you questions, and then you have a chance to look at it again and make changes, rewrite it, make editing changes, make more global changes in order to add more details. So that's the whole idea of process writing, where it's not just a one shot, you're done and you get a grade on it, but you go through this whole cycle in order to create something that's more meaningful for you, for your classmates, and your teacher.
when you say that there is this cycle, and then you just mentioned editing, and then you just mentioned some other steps, two questions about that. First, like, what are the steps, or how do you call these steps? I know that there are different versions of how the steps should go, but usually there is more like a standard way of mentioning like which the steps of writing are, of process writing are. Um, so the first question is, can you elaborate a little on which those steps are, and does in what moment as a writer do you stop your final version? Because then you have somebody else read it, and then probably they will give it back to you, and then you can do this like so many times. So in what moment do you stop? So these are the two questions that I have right now.
Okay, so the first step is always generating ideas, brainstorming, mind maps, vocabulary exploration, all of these activities that you do to generate ideas and to activate your the schemata, the language structures that you need, vocabulary structures. As a second step, which is also considered pre-writing, is organizing your ideas, and that can be outlining. You can also use mind maps, depending on how you use mind maps to organize ideas. For me, these two steps are considered pre-writing. And then drafting, which is the writing stage. So that's when you take these ideas and you put them into the sentences or the paragraph, whatever you're writing. And then after that, you have the post-writing, which could be peer evaluation, it could be teacher evaluation, and it's also where you go into a rewriting. And then rewriting can be redrafting, where you really rewrite things, or really the final step then is editing. And that's where you just correct surface errors in order to hand in the final draft. And in answer to your question of when that ends, it ends when you feel satisfied. And many students never feel completely satisfied. Others are satisfied very early, and they're like, yeah, whatever, it's done, I'm going to turn it in. So really it's a decision of each individual student to say, okay, I feel like this is good enough, or I've run out of time. Because frequently when you're doing writing, it's for a class, and at some point the teacher says that this is the last day that you can turn this in. So you just have to say, okay, it is what it is. I have to finish now, and I have to turn it in. But yeah.
So you're talking about satisfaction as a teacher. Yeah, so as a student, you're satisfied with the writing, and then in that moment you say, this is it. Well, as you just mentioned, there are moments in which you just have a deadline, and then you just submit whatever you have. But satisfaction is then key in finishing your process of writing, which could also probably give you the inspiration to start some other piece of writing. Um, what about for the teacher? In what moment does a teacher feel satisfied about the teaching process and the of the students? How can a teacher measure that satisfaction and say, yes, it is complete, or and also how can a teacher feel satisfied with the actual teaching or writing?
Well, I think first of all, the teacher needs to establish, what their goal is for each writing assignment. So you establish like an assignment that has certain criteria that the students need to comply with in order to successfully complete that assignment. If it's an A1 level, it could be a 3-sentence paragraph describing what you did last weekend. And you want to have a certain number of general details in that description. And so, you have your students work on that. And when they turn it in, if you say, okay, there are 3 definite sentences here, so check. They're definitely talking about something that happened in the past tense, things that, not dreaming about what might happen in the future, but talking about something that did physically happen in the past. So, you look for those criteria that fulfill whatever it is that you would like your students to be able to accomplish in the writing assignment. But again, if it is write 3 sentences about something you did last weekend, I really wouldn't want you to mark all of the grammar errors in the past tense. I would say keep note of those, keep track of how your students are doing. And if you feel that they still don't understand past tense, then you can focus a grammar lesson specifically on, okay, we need to reinforce this because you're still not doing it very well. And then you can do more grammar specific activities in order to help them with that past tense. But you use the writing assignment as input in order to help you see how the students are developing in that skill. So yeah, from the point of view of the teacher, I would say, you need to know what you expect from your students. And one way to do that I've discovered is for you to write anything that you ask your students to write, you should write as well. Because if you don't do that, you don't know. I mean, sometimes teachers come up with these assignments and then their students really have a difficult time complying with those assignments. And then if the teacher had sat down before with those instructions and tried to write the assignment, they might say, I lost you. I don't know if that was still recording while you disappeared.
Yes, it is recording. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, I stopped
So,
talking.
so the teacher goes on with creating these assignments, and sometimes they don't even measure. They don't position themselves in the role of the learner.
Exactly.
So, that was what you were saying when and okay. So thank you so much for that. Like this is like the final question or a couple of final questions. Um, at some point, this writing that you are mentioning and having clear what the expectations are on the writing assignment also bring the teacher with the possibility of feedback. So we have talked about, or there are like two types of feedback: content feedback and corrective feedback. So how do you see writing interacting with these two types of feedback?
For me, writing should only have content feedback in the writing portion of your course. And I know most of you aren't going to have the luxury of teaching an exclusive writing course. You're going to be using writing within a general skills course. So for me, what you need to do, as I said, you need to separate those two. Grammar is on one side. And if you say specifically, write 3 sentences using the future tense, then you're marking the grammar errors because that's what you're asking students to do. And I would say don't mark any other grammar errors except the future tense, because that's not fair to the students. If you say write 3 sentences using the future tense, your focus should be on the future tense, not anything else that's going on in the sentence. Now, if you're doing writing activities parallel to this, the feedback on the writing activities for me should be exclusively based on content to help the students develop something that's more full, that's more creative, that's more descriptive. Whatever it is your goal is for that writing assignment, my suggestion is to focus on that and give uh, feedback specifically on how to develop that content more. And that's the wonderful thing about process writing, because you've got a lot of opportunities to interact with your students. And a single writing assignment can be spread out over several days. And it's really a way to help students learn vocabulary, because it's not just talking about it one day and then bam, the next day we're talking about something else. Today we're doing brainstorming and you're generating that vocabulary. And then tomorrow we're going to do a mind map. We're using that same vocabulary, starting to organize the ideas. Then the next day, now write an outline with that. And then the following day, okay, write, your 3 or 4 or 5 sentences about this topic. And then, they read it again after that. And so by going through this whole process, you have this chance to give feedback to the development of the ideas, reinforce that vocabulary. You can give comments on grammatical structure in a more informal way as they're doing it. And then when they turn in that final product that has, after all of this process, you can really focus on giving them feedback on the content, because you know the content, because you've been working with them over these last few days as they've been developing it.
So also, yeah, as I listen to you, it gives me the idea that the feedback can be interwoven all along the process, and also probably including extra materials. You've mentioned mind maps as a way of writing, but then you can also get resource and inspiration for writing from watching a video, listening to a song, taking a look at a drawing. So I guess that you can also insert some elements from different materials for
Definitely.
teaching.
And
Okay.
also just
Um,
conversations with their classmates and with you. Yeah.
Okay, super. So just to conclude, I want to thank you for your time and also for sharing this inspiration. I think that your comments give us a lot of ideas on or a little food for thought about teaching writing, what writing could be in an English class. Well, thank you so much. We really hope to see you soon.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Brian. And good luck to everyone. I sincerely hope that you can, learn to love writing as much as I do. And I hope to see you someday in the future in the master's program. And then we can continue exploring this whole concept of writing.
Okay, super. Thank you so much.
Thank you.